So, good afternoon, one and all. For this topic, that is radio frequency, basics about it, and its clinical applications. So, I am Dr. Prashant Putran, working as a consultant interventional pain physician with the Alleviate Pain Clinics, Bangalore. So, regarding today's topic, there's an overview that radio frequency is a very important tool for an interventional pain physician to provide pain relief in patients who are having this persistent pain lasting for months together, and they are very resistant to the regular kind of treatment which is being offered to them. Okay, so a thorough knowledge about the basics and its applications is very important to provide that particular patient with the proper treatment so that at the end we achieve a good pain relief in such patients. So without any further ado, let's get into the topic. So the overview of today's talk, I will be dealing with the definition, the types of radio frequency, modalities available, and briefly about the physics involved in the generation of this radio frequency and what it does in the body and how it helps in alleviating pain, and then moving on to the clinical applications. So coming to the definition, radio frequency lesioning refers to the delivery of high frequency electrical current in the radio frequency range, that is approximately around 500 kilohertz, to the patient's tissue via an RF electrode to induce a biological effect, thus such as the thermal destruction of nerves that carry painful impulses. Okay. So what does it tell? That we need to have a machine which generates this high frequency electrical current, and then we need a modality or a tool through which we can supply these radio frequency waves to the patient at the site necessary, so that it causes or induces a biological effect such as the thermal destruction of the nerves. Okay, of what nerves? The nerves which carry the pain impulses. So briefly about the history. So it goes as far as back to the 1920s, the early 1920s, where Cushing did a series of experiments to show the utility of the radio frequency technique. Further on, moving on to the 1930s, where the Kirshner used high frequency lesions of Gasserian ganglion for the painful trigeminal neuralgia. In 1950, Huntsberger and West proposed high frequency alternating current for the first time. And the historical landmark would be in 1950s, where Kosman and Arnoff produced the first commercially available RF generator. So as we saw in the definition, we need an RF generator and we need a tool to pass these radio frequency currents into the patient at the desired tissue to produce the desired biological effect. So the setup in general involves the RF generator and then the RF needle and the cable, which is the tool I was referring to, which will carry these radio frequency currents. And then to maintain the circuit, we need the ground pad as well. Okay. So very graphically, it would appear like this. This is the patient's head end, the foot end, and then we have to maintain the closed circuit, wherein the generator is urged, and then you have the probe, which carries the RF current which is produced by the generator, and as you can see, it passes through the patient. Okay, and then from the desired site as well, from there to the grounding pads, it's taken into the ground. Okay, so this maintains the closed circuit while performing the radio frequency lesioning procedures. So coming to the classification, so there's something called as a conventional RF, which we commonly refer to as the thermal RF. Okay, so you see that it's classified based on the set temperature and then the electrode polarity. So in the electrode polarity, we have monopolar RF and the bipolar RF. And with the set temperature, we can have the thermal RF and the pulsed RF. Okay, we will be dealing in detail with all these aspects to see how different they are from each other. All right. So now we know that we need to maintain a closed circuit. So that involves the RF generator, the radio frequency probe, okay, and then the grounding point. All right. So coming to the probe as such. So in other words, we are referring to the radio frequency cannula. Okay, so it is a hollow structure. So as you can see over here, this is one of the cooled RF cannulas. All right. So basically, it'll have a shaft. So it'll have a shaft and then the tip. Okay, is the cooled RF, and then we have the regular conventional RF needles. So to be showing you on the screen per se, so we have the shaft. Okay, this is the insulated shaft, and then we have the tip, which is uninsulated. All right, and then it is hollow from within. That's why it's referred as a cannula, which is available in various size lengths and various gauges as well, which determines the inner diameter of the cannula. So it is they do come in as reusable or disposable versions, and the exposed tip delivers the RF current. As I said, the shaft is insulated. So the whole principle is that when the RF current is passed, it should be only be passing into the patient's body at the tip, at the uninsulated portion. Okay. So the total length of the cannula, the length of the exposed tip, the sharpness, and the type of the tip. As you can see, whether it's a curved tip or a straight tip, all these matter on which direction finally the radio frequency currents are being passed, and also determines the kind of lesion we are developing and the size of the lesion as well. So what happens when we finally pass the RF current? Okay, so this is a picture depicting only the tip of the RF cannula. All right, wherein you also have a coupled thermistor, wherein a probe is passed through this the hollow shaft. Okay, the probe is the one which actually passes the current, and finally it is delivered through the shaft, hollow shaft, onto the tip of the RF cannula. Okay, so what happens? So when the RF current is passed, there is something called as frictional heating which occurs. Where does it occur? At the tip. Okay, between the biological tissue and the tip. So in the biological tissue, it leads to the friction between the electrolytes in the tissue and the tip. The tip is passing the alternating current. Okay, so at a level of 500 kilohertz. So when such a high frequency RF current is passed, there will be constant friction between the electrolytes and the tip and the current, which will be producing the heat. All right. So the heat is mainly produced in the tissue. Very important point to remember. The electrode itself doesn't heat up. It's the tissue, the biological tissue beyond the tip, around the tip, is what gets heated up. Okay. So what happens to this heat? So as you know, once there is any energy, so basically you're giving some sort of energy over there. So due to the various thermodynamic laws, you know that it cannot stay constant over there. So the energy gets absorbed by the neighboring tissues, the neighboring tissue, as well as the blood which is flowing over there. So the blood flow takes away the heat. So constantly you are providing the heat, the energy, and constantly it's being removed. Okay. So when it is being removed, certain amount of it comes back to the electrode tip, and that is because of the coherent heat diffusion. That is what is called as the coherent heat diffusion. So why do we need this concept of coherent heat diffusion? So finally, when you saw the setup, in that there was a generator, and the generator will have a lot of values displayed on it. Okay, so there will be a set temperature, and there will be a value which tells you about the tip temperature. Okay, and other variables as well. What frequency are you using? What volts? All those things will be displayed. What mode of radio frequency are we using? Is it the conventional or the pulsed RF? All these things. So in all those variables, the tip temperature is mainly because of the coherent heat diffusion, and it helps you to know the tip temperature. And as we know, we set a particular temperature. So we need to have the tip temperature closer to that value, not crossing that value, because normally we go up to 90 degrees Celsius. So anything beyond 95 degrees Celsius, then the tissues can start boiling, and there can be cavitations which can develop. So monitoring the tip temperature is very important, and that is with the help of coherent heat diffusion. So what happens? The tip At the tip, the radio frequency waves will be, the current will be going on, the tissue will be getting heated up, and there will be a lesion which will be produced. So now you are giving a constant current, and then what happens that finally the tissue also reaches up to that state of temperature. So that is what is called as the steady state. So any current which passes beyond that, after it reaches the steady state, it is just to maintain the temperature and not to cause overheating. Okay. So there are factors which produce the heat, like the power what you're giving, and then there are factors which take away the heat. So the balance of this has to be maintained to produce a adequate size lesion in and around the nerves which we are targeting. So coming to the lesion per se, so this is the, as you can see over here, it is the needle tip. Okay, this is the tip, and this is the uninsulated part where you can see an ellipsoidal kind of lesion around it. And as governed by the laws of physics, it is the temperature is more around the tip, and as you go beyond, the temperature reduces, and even the lesioning also reduces. All right. So it is described as an inverted cone kind of an appearance. Okay, and the size and consistency of the lesion depends upon the electrode tip configuration. So whether it is the bevel of the tip, how the bevel of the tip is placed over here, as you can see over here, and the temperature what we set, and how much during the process of radio frequency ablation, how much the temperature, what is the final temperature reached at the tip, and the local tissue characteristics, and the rate of thermal equilibrium. That means how fast that steady state is achieved, because once the steady state is achieved, there will not be further heating. Okay, and then how long you do the ablation for in terms of seconds or minutes. All right. So at this point, I would like to bring upon a very important parameter among the local tissue characteristics is the impedance. Okay. So impedance is nothing but the resistance which is experienced by the for the passing of the alternating current. So the alternating current will be passing. So what is the resistance offered to it by the tissues is nothing but the impedance. And as in the analog screen, even the impedance value will be displayed. Okay, and it's very important to see the number displayed in that analog, which shows the impedance value, because indirectly it tells us what tissue are we dealing with. So as per the studies by Cosman et al., they have published that anything beyond less than 100 or closer to 50 ohms, it is described in ohms. So we usually the tip would be in a vascular tissue. Okay, and anything, especially while doing a say a genicular thermal ablation. Okay, and the impedance of beyond 800, 900 would say that we are near the periosteum, or probably we have pierced the periosteum of the bone. Okay, so it has to be ideally maintained between this somewhere about 200 to within 400 to 500 ohms. Okay, so that is the importance of impedance. So here also there's one more picture where so far we have seen only one electrode and its tip, where you have the two electrodes over here. This is nothing but the bipolar version of radio frequency ablation. Okay. So this is a picture which depicts the difference of the size of the lesion between a standard RF and a cooled RF. Now, what is this cooled RF? So far, we spoke about monopolar, bipolar, thermal, and pulsed. Now, what is this cooled? Okay, it's a variation of the thermal RF itself, but it has a different mechanism, which I will be explaining in the further slides. This slide is just to show the difference of the size of the lesion produced by the standard RF as well as the cooled RF. As you can see, it's almost double the size. Okay, and you also have to keep in mind that along the shaft of the needle, you have a more exposure towards the lesion rather than the tip. So this, I would say, is the most important slide of the session today, wherein we can see how the size of the lesion varies with the various parameters involved and the kind of needles or the electrodes which we use. Okay, so as you can see over here, the tip length. So as the length of the tip increases, you can see correspondingly the width and the length of the lesioning being increased. Okay. So similarly with the diameter, which is using the gauge. So as we saw, it comes in different gauges: 20 gauge, 22 gauge, so on and so forth. Commonly, 20 to 22 gauge needles are used in case of the genicular nerve thermal ablations. So if you take 20 gauge, it's in the middle over here. So the width is around 6.6 mm and 12 mm in length. It's quite a big lesion, but you can also get a bigger lesion by so by increasing the gauge of the needle. Okay, mind you, you also have to keep in mind the procedural pain also. So you have to take a call of that as well while you tend to choose the diameter of the gauge of the RF cannula. Okay, so with the temperature, you can see as the temperature increases, the size of the lesion is increasing, and then again with the time what we use, again there will be a same directly proportional increase in the size of the lesion. Okay, what is important here to focus again on this last picture over here, wherein it deals with the bipolar RF. So these lesions are what are called as strip lesions. Okay, it's like a strip in pattern, wherein it is because of the usage of two such needles where the tips are in close proximity, and because each one acts independently, finally you have a bigger lesion because of the combined effects of the both the electrodes. Okay. Again, the same factors also govern the lesion, the strip size lesion of this particular bipolar RF as well, increasing with the gauge, the time, the temperature which is being used. So coming to the monopolar cautery aspect, the radio frequency. So you have 5 points over here. So this has to be done as a protocol while performing the monopolar thermal RF. All right. So before that, the decision to use monopolar or not again is by the clinical judgment and what area are we trying to ablate in the patient. All right. So as you can see, you have to the placing of the ground pad is very important, and it has to be a very good contact with the skin of the patient. If it is in the in the left knee, it's preferably applied in the left leg, lower leg, okay, lower limb, and the cannula is placed percutaneously near the nerve target. Okay, so before placing percutaneously, you have to apply local anesthetic. Okay, and then stimulation. So stimulation is very important because we need to be as proximal in proximity with the desired tissue. Desired tissue, most of the time it is the nerves involved. So how do we achieve that? That is with the help of motor stimulation and sensory stimulation. To start off with the sensory stimulation. So once the you know that with the help of either can be done, most of them can be done fluoroscopically, also with the help of ultrasound these days, or you can do a hybrid technique. And then once you know that you have the target tissue, how close you are or how far you are with respect to the tip of the electrode. Okay, so you do a sensory stimulation at higher frequency, that is around 50 hertz. You do at low voltage, you do that, and low voltage high frequency stimulation, and then you see whether the similar pain pattern or could be paresthesia also at times is appreciated in and around the area which is involved. Okay, and normally for a proper adequate lesioning, they say that the tip should be at least within 3 mm proximity of the nerve. So that is achieved at 0.6 volts. Okay, so you can use the analog screen, and then you can reduce or increase the voltage, and then see the frequency is fixed. It's 50 hertz. The voltage is increased or decreased, and then you see at what level you get the sensory stimulation, and then you adjust the depth of the needle appropriately. Okay. So now after sensory, it's very important that there should not be any motor nerves in the vicinity as well. So that is achieved again with the help of, you try to see it with the help of motor stimulation, wherein at 2 hertz and higher voltage, the voltage is almost double that is needed for the sensory stimulation. So the studies say that when you use a double voltage required for the adequate sensory stimulation at low frequency, if there are no muscle twitches in and around at the site, then it is thought that there are no major motor nerves at around at 3 mm vicinity of the lesioning site. Okay. Okay. So we spoke about the monopolar thermal RF. All right. So COOLIF, as I said earlier, is another version of thermal RF. Okay. So this is just the system. This is just the system what is involved. Okay. Here in this COOLIF system, you can use monopolar, bipolar as well, depending upon the number of lesions and the width of the lesion you want, and it can be used at various sites. Like here we have at the genicular neurotomy, which is being performed. Similarly with the hip and also at the shoulder. So the main parameter which guides in COOLIF, as I showed in the earlier slide, is the size of the lesion. Okay, and especially in the nuclear neurotomy, it is shown to have the analgesia effect is shown to be more than last longer than the conventional thermal RF. Okay, so how do we achieve the largest size over here? So there's one parameter which is told about is the impedance. Okay, so similarly, there is an impedance which is offered to the RF current by the tissues. Okay, so now as we saw in the earlier slide, we saw that with increased temperature, we can achieve a bigger lesion. So why not give higher temperatures? Already mentioned at higher temperatures, we can have harmful effects at the biological tissues like cavitation, scarring, burns, things like that. So we have to maintain the temperature at a lower level, but within that span of time of the RF radio frequency ablation, you need to achieve a bigger lesion. So they have developed this Coolif system where the electrode tip is internally cooled with the help of a catheter and an inflow of cool water at room temperature, so that the tip doesn't the temperature doesn't cross, but you can still achieve a constant lesioning in the same duration or more duration, thus increasing the size of the lesion. All right, so that is the Coolif system, which is widely popular these days, and just various applications which I'll be telling soon. So coming to the monopolar pulsed RF. So pulsed RF, as you can see in the graph, the similar lesioning is not done continuously. So in a conventional RF, again, the tissue temperature reaches approximately 80 to 90 degrees. Okay, and it's a constant heating which occurs, thus causing biological destruction. Okay, it's called a thermal destruction of the site or the nerve involved, which is again reflected with the Wallerian degeneration and the myelin disruption uh, with the studies seen. Okay, so now where in situations where you need to just have a sensory issue and you do not and need to have a motor sparing kind of an effect, that is where you can go for pulsed RF, because it's not a constant where the radio frequency waves are given in pulses with a gap of 20 milliseconds between each pulse and at around 45 voltage. So if you see the generator, when you set these parameters, automatically it comes to as 42 degrees Celsius for 120 seconds automatically. So even in your generator, if you switch on the pulse RF mode, automatically it will go on to 42 degrees Celsius and 120 seconds. Okay, as you can see, it's a burst of RF which is given. Why is it given? Because in between these bursts, there is a time for the tissue to cool down. Okay, or the dissipation of the heat occurs. So there is no continuous heating of the biological tissue which occurs in case of pulsed RF, thus having this motor sparing kind of effects. But even with studies, they say the actual benefits, the analgesic benefits of pulsed RF is still under study, and a lot of studies have to be done to exactly know how it is achieving the analgesia. So far we have seen that we are just using a probe, and it's almost an injection what is performed with the help of a local anesthetic. Of course, taking in care of the do's and don'ts and following the protocols required. So we have advantages like it's very minimally invasive. The lesion size is controlled. You know that you can set the temperature, the time, and the kind of mode, or the pulse mode, or the conventional mode, or you can opt for a cooled RF, things like that. And accurate placement of the cannula, because it's not done blindly, it's done either with the help of fluoroscopy or with the help of ultrasound, and the lesions can be reproduced, and the recovery is rapid, and it leads to minimum morbidity and mortality. So the indications are conditions which cause nociceptive, because of nociceptive pain, neuropathic pain, sympathetically mediated pain, and cancer-related pain. So in cancer-related pain, you know that it can be a mixed kind of pains, but most of the time it is a sympathetic mediated pain where you can use this radiofrequency ablation of the plexuses like celiac plexus, the supraepigastric plexus. In case of the upper limb, you go for the stereo ganglion RF, all right, or even in case of mixed pain syndromes and also in neuropathic pain conditions. So similarly, the applications would be in case of a facetogenic pain or a chronic osteoarthritis of the knee, which is more in terms of a nociceptive kind of pain. Also, a bit of neuropathic pain involved, and the most important cause of axial pain in younger individuals, discogenic pain, is the applications of radiofrequency ablation is with the current studies is shown that it's very good, and especially with the help of biocuplasty, with the help of bipolar needles, we achieve the pain generator in a discogenic pain is usually the nociceptive fibers along the annulus fibrosus. So we target that, and it can be very good on a long term, providing long term results, pain relief in patients. And then in the dorsal root ganglion rhizotomies, then coming to the SI joint pain, the sacroiliac joint pain. Okay, so now you know that sacroiliac joint is a big joint, so you have to target the multiple nerves involved. Then, in case of axial pain, as I already discussed, and very important cause, another cause is trigeminal neuralgia, wherein the gastric ganglion, the radiofrequency ablation of which can provide long-term results, very good, very constant and long-term pain relief in these patients, thus reducing the other medications which are providing pain relief in such patients, thus reducing the morbidity in such patients. And also in case of coxicodynia, where we target the ganglion impart to provide adequate or prolonged constant pain relief in such patients. So we saw the indications. Now coming to the contraindications, there are some absolute and relative contraindications. The absolute contraindication would be an infection at the site, coagulopathy because you're using a needle, and equally if it's a wide bore needle. In case of pregnancy, in case of different dedifferentiation pain. So dedifferentiation pain is the pain which usually occurs after a radiofrequency ablation. Okay, so if that is the cause, then it doesn't serve the purpose. Or a failed diagnostic block. This is a very, very important point. I'll come back to it. And it's not to be used as a replacement to surgery. Okay. So relative would be patients with pacemakers and pain relief which is lasting less than 3 months, which you've already tried and seen that. Okay, then it becomes a relative contraindication. So coming to the patient selection criteria, as in the earlier slide, the contraindications have to be ruled out. Any chronic pain condition can be considered, and a favorable response to diagnostic blocks with at least 50% pain relief. This is the point which I was referring to, a diagnostic block. It is a must before you jump into radiofrequency ablation. So you have to have a successful or a favorable response to that particular site diagnostic block with at least 50% pain relief. And they say you can use different local anesthetic, two different local anesthetics also to perform two diagnostic blocks which are spaced 2 weeks apart, wherein once the local anesthetic action wears off, the patient has to get back the concordant pain, and the concordant pain is lost again with the when you perform the diagnostic block. Then only we can, and the pain relief should be at least 50%. After that, only we can go ahead to decide to go for a radiofrequency ablation. And of course, the last point deals with the how well and how effectively you counsel your patients, and do not give them unrealistic expectations, and you also be very realistic and convey the same to the patients as well. This is the same point dealing with the diagnostic block, 2 occasions, 2 weeks apart. with 2 different local anesthetics to test the concordant response. So one of the frequent applications would be the facet joint syndrome, which is a common but underdiagnosed component of low back pain, and wherein the interventional pain physician can provide long-term pain relief in this patient because they are not amenable to any surgical interventions, and the conservative management is very difficult and often not giving good results. And the results obtained with steroids are for short-term relief, whereas the RF neurotomy has a long-term success rate of at least 60 to 70% in well-selected patients. So this is the general rules what we follow in case of the patient preparation. Any antiplatelets have to be stopped, routine blood tests, nil proler if you are planning for sedation, and along with the other comorbidities of the patient, the scheduled dose of the antihypertensive and antidiabetics have to be given, and a proper IV access has to be there with peri-procedure IV antibiotics. Within the room of performing the RF, we need to follow certain guidelines where basic monitoring has to be available with the required necessary resuscitation equipments and drugs, and you need to check your RF machine well prior to the procedure, and appropriate IV cannula and grounding pad has to be applied, and a thermistor connection to the RF machine has to be achieved. Okay, so because we spoke about the facet joint syndrome, you can see the facet joint is nothing but a joint between the inferior articular process and the superior articular process of the adjacent vertebrae. So there are 2 in number on one on each side, so 2 at each level, and then if you can see the nerve supply, once the sensory root comes out, then it gives off a medial branch, and that medial branch, as you can see, for example, if you take this particular facet joint, so this is the inferior articular process, and this is the superior articular process where I form the facet joint. Okay, so you can see that one nerve is coming from top, and then another nerve which is a branch of this particular sensory nerve. Okay, the medial branch. So at one particular level, especially at the lumbar level, at one facet joint is supplied by the medial branch at that level, and also one level above. Okay, so if you take L4-5 facet, it is supplied by L4 and L3. Okay, which are placed at respective levels of L4 and L5 vertebral level itself. So you'll be targeting for L4, L5 at L5 and L4 vertebra, but the nerve medial branch will be L4 and L3. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is they have dual nerve supply. So the neurotomy of these medial branches after a successful diagnostic block can provide very good pain relief in case of facetal pain syndrome. Okay, so fluoroscopically, once the patient is on table, you start off with an AP view, which is centralized, and the level of the facet is identified, and then you further go ahead with the squaring of that particular vertebra, and then further moving on to the providing the oblique view, where you can see, where you have to visualize the junction between the superior articular process and then the transverse process. Okay, so if you go back to the previous picture, you can see that the medial branch is traversing in that groove, which groove is at the junction of the transverse process and the superior articular process. So it is in this groove. So that groove has to be identified in the fluoroscopy as well, which requires hardly of 10 to 15 degrees or 25 degrees of oblique angle. And then once the skin is infiltrated with the help of the needle, the required RF needle, it is entered. You achieve an end-on view, and then dye is injected, and you can see where you are. And then this is mainly for the diagnostic block, where they're using a spinal needle, and then you are placing the local anesthetic medication. Okay, so when after a successful diagnostic block, which is the diagnostic block, after that you go ahead with the radio frequency ablation. So in particular, in when performing for the facet joint per se, medial branch per se, the sensory stimulation again is done at 50 hertz. The same ergonomics is maintained. You reach the site in the similar way, and then there are different methods where they approach the, because of the obliquity of the groove. There are descriptions where you tend to achieve to reach this groove, you go one level lower, and then you come in this oblique fashion, rather than how you perform for a diagnostic block. Okay, because as you know that we need to be as parallel as the RF needle has to be as parallel to this nerve as possible. Okay, to achieve maximum visioning. Okay, so we cannot achieve that with an end-on kind of approach over here. So there are techniques where you come from a level lower, and so that you can place the RF needle parallel onto the groove over here, the tip of the RF. Okay, and once you do that, a sensory stimulation is done at 50 hertz. Okay, so what we will see, paresthesia is there in the area concerned. Okay, and then we go ahead with the motor stimulation at 2 hertz, and that is confirmed by the twitch of the multifidus muscle, because it is very closely associated spinal muscle over here. And once the position is confirmed, to avoid the pain during the radiofrequency ablation, 1 ml of local anesthetic is injected to reduce the discomfort, and then the lesioning is carried out at 80 degrees Celsius for 90 seconds. So it's a conventional sort of RF. So depending on the level, multiple levels, you can perform it, not more than 3 levels, and the adequate post-op instruction should be given, like ice pack application, and you need to prescribe systemic analgesics for 3 to 4 days, and also counsel that the effect is not immediate. It's not like a diagnostic block. Okay, so it takes around 10 to 14 days, almost 2 to 3 weeks, you can say, and the pain relief is not, it may not be permanent, giving a realistic approach to that, saying that it would be around 6 months to 2 years, depending upon how the rehabilitation occurs, and it can also be repeated if the pain recurs. So, talking about the genicular nerve block or the radiofrequency neurotomy of the knee joint, indications, common indications are the chronic osteoarthritis of the knee, failed knee replacement surgeries, patient or unfit for knee replacement or unfit for the surgery as well. So genicular nerves, you know that these are the nerves which supply the knee joint. Okay, so these genicular nerves arise from various major nerves in and around the knee joint. Could be from the sciatic, or femoral, the common peroneal, tibial. So with respect to the location with the patella, you have the superior medial, superior lateral, and the inferior medial, which is commonly being targeted, because we cannot perform more than that, because sense of proprioception is also carried out by these genicular nerves, and so three of these major genicular nerves are targeted, which can be done fluoroscopically, or as you can see me performing under an ultrasound. So similarly, again, we go ahead with the protocols of, like, from the patient selection to patient counseling, and after that, once it is planned with the help of all the monitoring over here, and the sterility being performed, and then we go ahead with the RF ablation, by first with the sensory and the motor, same as 50 hertz for sensory and 2 hertz for motor, and see for any twitches accordingly, where you have placed the RF needle, medially, lateral, or inferiorly. And then after providing adequate local anesthesia, we go ahead with the RF ablation. And depends, we can go with the in-plane, out-of-plane technique, depends on the expertise as well. And yeah, that's about the knee RF, genicular nerve radiofrequency ablation. And as I said earlier, one of the causes of axial discogenic pain, especially seen in youngsters, where you have the annulus fibrosis and the nociceptors around that being very active and being the cause of pain. So with the help of, so this you can see is a cooled RF needle where it's passed on either side, and we have entered the disc is entered almost, it is in the nucleus pulposus region. So again, the impedance will guide us to see at what level we are, where the needle tip is, and then you can see can perform a strip lesion to target all those nociceptive fibers around the annulus fibrosis, thus giving a long-term pain relief for low back pain and in case of discogenic pain conditions, case of degenerated disc. Okay. So overall, the minimal standards and recommendations should be a multidisciplinary patient selection, and the prior diagnostic blocks should be performed, and informed consent describing in detail about the said mentioned side effects or the efficacy and of the procedure. All these things should be mentioned, and it could be a fluoroscopy or an ultrasound, and a standardized report and a standardized follow-up has to be maintained, and an acute training of physicians or the personnel performing the radiofrequency ablation is also mandatory. So the overall message is that an appropriate use of the radiofrequency ablation shows promise when used responsibly in properly selected patients and in conjunction with a multidisciplinary approach to the treatment of pain. Okay. So there are, as I already mentioned, there are other applications in case of cancer pain as well, where it can be a boon to the patient where they are on strong opioids and still not responding any resistant pain conditions. So the newer technology like cooled RF can go a long way in giving good pain relief in such patients. So when you say a multidisciplinary approach and a responsible approach to these conditions is very much required to provide proper pain relief. Thank you.